All right. And we're live. Welcome to the DAoC Weekly State of the Game post-stream stream. I'm super glad to have you with us tonight. So this is live. There are no delays at all. It's just you and me and the other folks in chat talking about everything that's going on at the moment. So the first question is AMK DAoC says, IRC still ripping or population pretty dead? IRC, if you're referring to the current IRC group, and I've talked about this God knows how many times on stream about how I hate calling them IRC because there's been like God knows how many hundreds of people that have played in IRC groups. But if you're talking about Zoo, Patar, those folks, they are still alive and well. They're playing every single night, and the population's okay. It's actually been better lately than I think it's been in the past few weeks. Lots of action, pretty well balanced. Alb now has a BG in the evenings, which is great, or at least there are folks that are stepping in to run it during the week that are being like overly aggressive. Not overly. I'm not complaining. Do not read this as a complaint. I'm loving the fact that there are Albs on. But the state of the game is actually really good in terms of population. Let's see here. Fueled X has ripped logged in since the incident. So we can talk about that for sure. I'm happy to talk about because it's public knowledge. It's not something that we have to shy away from. As far as I know, Ripweed is not logged in, but we'll talk about that. Bammers is here. Hi, Bammers. It was a long time. It was a lot of fun tonight. I think we walked away with like, was it like 70K, 80K, 90K? It's like 80K maybe. It's pretty good. It's a good night and a lot of fun. Borgio says, the newsletter said something like some adjustments to keep focused combat abilities. Do you think that this could mean changes to climbing or something to siege? We'll get into that too. So to answer the first question, how's the population? It's good right now. I think we're averaging during peak prime time, I think somewhere between 400 to 700 people on, all in all. And with the RP bonuses being pretty consistent, there was a little bit of a drop-off before this most recent event for Thanksgiving. It ends, the event, for the Thanksgiving event, the turkey leg event, ends tomorrow morning. And then it will, I think the midwinter, is it midwinter? Ollie knows more about midwinter than I do, but I'm pretty sure that happens sometime around the 17th. So there will be a couple of weeks here where there will be some really, really good small man. There'll be some good Zerg action too, but I think really good small man, 8-man action. Good for soloers too. And then when the RP bonus comes back, it'll be even better. Christmas time is always nuts in the game. So if there's ever been a time to sub, I think it's now. So let's talk a little bit about Ripweed. I'm not going to spend too much time going over it. I got something stuck to my glasses. Sorry. I won't spend too much time talking about it, but we'll at least go over it, and I've got an understanding of what happened. So back on, I think it was November 23rd, Ripweed was caught farming what we believe to be his own tunes in New Frontiers. These were not level 50 tunes. This was not RP farming. Let's make this abundantly clear. This was not RP farming. It was getting the kill credit. It was farming kill credit. There also was no event, as far as I can tell, that was up at that point. So I think he was trying to complete the solo mission on his own. But most of the tunes were somewhere between level 10 and level 30. So, and he killed them all at once in Alb New Frontiers. So as a result, action was taken on his account. I don't know to what extent. All I know is that he was stripped of somewhere north of 93 million realm points, which he was somewhere realm rank 13L1, 13L2, something maybe even higher than that. But he was stripped of his realm rank. So he's now realm rank 0. I don't know if he's been banned or if there's been any other action. I just simply don't know. But he was stripped of his RPs. And I think coming from a person who ran with Ripweed, right? Like was never in his group, but he was in the Zerg with us, and he was like, I think I have no reason not to like the guy as a human, but he made a huge mistake and he paid the price for it. And I don't think that Broadsword's actions fell short of what they should have done. You RP farm, you killing your own tunes for whatever purpose, I think you deserve to lose all your realm points. I don't think you deserve a warning. I don't think anything like that. That's just my personal opinion. I think the punishment was fair. And I think anybody who says otherwise would say exactly the opposite if it was somebody else on mid or on alb that was caught. Yeah, he's a lone enforcer. He does have the title of LE, and that title has not been stripped. So he's still technically the tune is still a lone enforcer. Now, whether he was banned or not, I don't know. It's not apparent to me that he was banned. I think maybe for a short period of time, but certainly his realm points were stripped. And cheaters get caught. There's action taken against you. And there's a couple things to note about what happened with Ripweed. One is that I think it was first noticed in Discord, or it was first noticed by players who then appealed it. And second is that there are CSRs that exist. I don't care who tells you that they don't exist. I have proof. I know that they do exist, and they do run around all the time. You don't see them, but they're there. So they do in fact investigate claims. They don't play favorites. There's mounting evidence to show that Broadsword is in fact incredibly fair about the way in which they handle people who do wrong in the game. Everybody from IRC to Hero, all the way down, have been actioned. So I don't want to hear any of this nonsense about Broadsword playing favorites anymore. That's crap, and that's got to end. It's that the evidence just doesn't show that that's the case. You can feel that way in your heart all you want. I hear this all the time in the game. Broadsword plays favorites. Cite me evidence that they play favorites. Show me evidence. Because as far as I know, people all across the spectrum of the game have been actioned for cheating. And just because you don't know that they've been actioned, you personally don't know, doesn't mean that it didn't happen. Okay, rant off. There's that. Let's talk a little bit about what was in the newsletter, okay? Because this is, I think, there is some important news here. So you can see that very clearly here, Beeb, I don't know, I assume Carol writes this. I think she puts this all together. Leah might help out a bit or a ton, I don't know. But in any event, like there's definitely some teasers here. So we're going to read through it. We'll talk about it. So new keep defense improvements, new projections for I keep saying projections. I've read this a billion times and I keep saying that. New protections for inner keep, some adjustments to keep focused combat abilities. They are bringing Mithril back to veterans accounts. Also some usability updates to the Mithril store. That is news to me. I've not heard that before. The social window display issue, that's been an ongoing bug where people are logging in and not showing up automatically in /social. It's been going on for a long time, and I think Broadsword should have done more to fix it sooner, but that's just a personal pet peeve. I think they really could have, we could have afforded a small amount of downtime. And I think, again, personal opinion, I think there may be more to that bug, because if it was just a matter of downtime, I think it's big enough to take the server down. That's just my 10 cents. Name matching /command issue. Thank God you're going to fix that. That's awesome, and many more. So very excited about what Broadsword is talking about doing here. So let's go through it one by one, and then we'll get down to some of the other topics of discussion. So first off, new projections for see, I did it again. I need more beer, I think. New protections for inner keeps. So we've had this conversation on this stream and during the State of the Game Twitch casts, if you will, whatever you want to call it, talking about this specific issue. How there's been a lot of imbalance, especially during EU prime time, with Herorius' Zerg PvEing empty keeps. Part of that is Hero doing things that I think are pretty unproductive for the game, but also the reluctance of Albs to log in, because they don't have a leader, and I think there's this mentality on Alb that if you don't defend, the problem just goes away. So we talked about this like 4 weeks ago on the stream, and I think that there's a bunch of things that they could do. I'm going to talk to you about some of the things that I think that they could do. Please, in chat, you can offer up suggestions. This is actually a great place to offer up suggestions. The public Discord is a great place to offer up suggestions, as is the feedback form on the darkageofcamelot.com website. But things that have been circulated in the community that people have talked about, things like limiting climbing spikes, right? Reinforcing the inner, diseasing tanks that are, I'm not suggesting that any of these things are actually going to happen, but these are ideas that have been brought up. So if you've got a Zerg of 80 outside, and you're inside of a keep, and you're part of a realm that just simply doesn't have the numbers or doesn't want to defend, how do you make the fight fair, right? You limit the amount of climbers that come in. You might disease the tanks, limit the healing, limit some of the damage that they can do. All while trying to balance out this, what happens if it's a Zerg of 30 or 40 against a couple of really good 8-mans that are ripping, right? You don't want to give unnecessarily groups an enormous amount of defense bonus, right, for just showing up and ripping everybody. Like, it's got to be fair for everybody involved. So what does that look like? And those are some of the questions. I don't think oil improvements are going to help. Broadsword did a great job with trying to shore up some of the structure of the keep, trying to shore up the outer oil. They made some pretty significant changes. I want to say it was over a year ago. It might have been 2 years ago. But now more needs to be done. And so they're talking about addressing this whole Hororius issue is really what it comes down to. They won't say it, respectfully understand why, but it's really Hero that's causing the problem, and there needs to be a solution because it's killing EU primetime. And I think they're taking it very seriously. Some adjustments to keep focused combat abilities. What does that mean? I don't know. I really don't know what that means. That is a total up in the air thing. What are keep focused combat abilities? Right? They've already limited interrupts from catapults and trebs to roofs of structures. I think that was smart. But there's other things that can be done. Maybe they're going to introduce some new abilities. Maybe they're going to change storms. That could totally be it. Yep. So, climbing spikes. Borgius says climbing spikes are the only ones I can think of as abilities or storms, actually. Yeah. It could be that they adjust. I mean, they did just make some pretty serious adjustments to Stormlord. But I think, actually, were quite good. I have no complaints about their tweaks to Stormlord. I don't know. Kind of up in the air. Borgius says, I play heavy tanks and we really don't need it. You really don't need it. You're right. Heavy tanks don't need to, you don't need to have like 2 full groups of tanks climbing into the inner. That's just not something that you need to have happen. I mean, in reality, what you should have on the opposing realm is diseasers who can very quickly take down those tanks. But I think the less climbing, the better, frankly. I think that I'm not saying take climbing away from Sins at all. That needs to stay. There are some hybrid classes that have climb. I think that's important. But you don't need people climbing in the keep all day long when there's no defenders. So, and Broadsword does have the ability on the back end of the game to make these things dynamic, to change, right? They've proven this time and time again with things like population bonuses. This is, I don't know how heavy of a lift it is for them, but they can do it. Borgius says, but yeah, what screws with EU is the Zerg climbing in 10 to 15 strong and we can push them off. Yeah, because if you wipe their tanks, they're done. Right? I mean, if you wipe the two groups of tanks that Hero has when he's pushing into a keep, they're done at that point. But you're saying you're not able to push them off. See, once Hero dies inside of the courtyard and he can't be egged, as far as I'm concerned, the fight's over at that point. Because there's nobody else that wants to call the fight. So, anyway, Legan says no, he gets pushed out and then he trebs a hole. Right. So what do you do to prevent these big, and it's not, look, here's the other thing. It's not just about climbing in. It's about what happens when they're in the courtyard, right? Broadsword, a patch or two ago, reduced the strength of outer keep doors and increased the strength of inner keep doors. I think that was smart because courtyard fights, it's way easier to defend in a courtyard. There's so many different vantage points in fights in a courtyard that it makes it far easier. And you want the fight to be inside the CY. You don't want the fight to be outside. So I think that was actually good. I think that gives defenders an opportunity. But there's more that they can do. Bammer says, as long as these changes don't affect solo sin play inside of keeps, I'll be happy. I definitely see the problem, and I'm happy that they're trying to fix it. But they just can't hurt solo sin play, or I'm going to be so upset. I think that Broadsword is taking a pretty open approach to this. I don't think they're going to be nerfing classes that don't really contribute to the problem. Again, you know, could I be wrong about that? Sure. Ultimately, whatever the final changes are, but I think they're pretty careful about that. Legan says, if he, meaning Hero, sees that there's a lot, he'll leave. Heroes ran from me when he sees that there's more or equal numbers to him. Yeah, but in situations where, and by the way, this is starting to change on its own. There's a huge shift in the game just over the last couple of weeks. Albs running during EU and US Prime. That's balanced things out significantly. The mid-Zerg growing. It's unfortunate that the Hib-Zerg has lost numbers, but we don't have to go into that. It's good that there's a more of a tri-realm balance throughout the game, and that is making an enormous impact on Hero already. And whatever these changes are, I think there will be a huge difference too. Borgia says, the thing is, Legan, with having the US guys be online for EU Prime this week, it's been fine, but when you aren't there, we don't have it. Right. Once Hibcasters are in and they outnumber defenders, the fight is over. 3 more Hibcasters assisting just Slaughter's defense, and the Ments in a keep is absolutely silly. You fighting Hibcasters as Albs or Mids. Mids, it's a little different because you got pack healers that can AE stun. But fighting Albs, Hibs fighting Albs is a problem. It's really difficult. And what you have to do is you have to get out of line of sight. They can't stun you if you don't have line of sight. Does that limit the opportunities to defend? Yeah, absolutely. Sure. My suggestion would be wait until they come inside the inner, hold the balcony. But with 2 groups of push tanks, I don't know how you defend against that. I mean, I do. You can totally do it. We defend against the mids inside of balconies all the time on Hib. But I don't know without proper group setups on Alb how you do that. And I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. This is a very complicated issue to solve. But I'm glad that they're addressing it, right? Like they could have just turned a blind eye and they could have said, we don't get involved. Like they have said in the past, we don't get involved in these kinds of things. It's up to the realms to figure it out. And like, hint, like, spoiler alert, it kind of is up to the realms to solve. Somebody has to step up on Alb or on mid like Legan has. But they said, no, we're going to address it. I think that's good. We can come back to this. Let's talk a little bit about Mithril. Right? In 1.127, there was a late announcement that they were going to start adding Mithril to veteran accounts. Veteran being the veteran accounts is the way they define people who pay for a subscription, as opposed to Endless Conquest or free-to-play accounts. So the veteran / subscribed accounts were supposed to, back in 1.127, get some amount of free Mithril. That didn't happen on patch day. They said that they needed more time to roll it out. For those who have seen some of the changes to the account center and the Origin store many years ago, there's another component in all of this, which is EA. And I don't know if EA has anything to do with the Mithril. I imagine that because all of that is... So there's 2 ways that I see this happening, right? One is that, and I don't know how technically it works, but either Broadsword generates CD keys or account keys and gives them to the Origin store, and they're like stored, and so anytime you buy something for the Origin store, it like pulls out of the list of keeps that have been provided by Broadsword, or they're somehow linked between the 2. I don't know if that's the case. I don't know if there's actually any linking that's going on. I'm not sure. But if there is linking between the Origin Store and the account center, I'm willing to bet that there's some complications there. It's probably a technical issue. So I don't know. It's not easy to get stuff to integrate with this game, right? Because if it was, they would have built out a Camelot Herald XML like they had before many years ago, which I think was broken or at some point was depreciated. But there's all sorts of stuff that's actually existed in the past that no longer exists in terms of features. And they're working on bringing that back. It's just a smaller team. So trying to integrate things like free mithril might be a little bit more of a technical challenge than most of us just think it's just like a flipping the switch. And then Mithril Store usability updates. Again, no idea what that is, but I'm really excited. Maybe it's the idea of, being able to share items across accounts or across characters, that it might be one character per account items. I don't know. But that's kind of exciting because it's not like the Mithril Store is a great addition. It's been long overdue, but the implementation of it has always been, they've done the best that they can with the infrastructure that they've had. So maybe they're just going to tweak it to make Mithril a little easier to use. Borgio says there's definitely been an uptick in mids and albs now that the relics are reset. Well, I think what you mean is that they were, yeah, I'm reading in chat, that they were taken. Like Legan took them back. I think albs might have taken some relics back, or did the mids just like pull them out of the keep and just sit them down? I don't know exactly what happened there. Cybex says, sadly, this game probably needs hero at this point. Zerg leaders like him keep some people playing. That's true, but for every void that has ever happened in this game, there has always been somebody to fill it. It's ebbed and flowed over the last 19 years, and especially on Yuan, when all the servers merged and HIB didn't have a BG at all during US primetime for almost a decade, at like 8 years. I want to say that they didn't have a BG during US primetime. And it took a while. But now there's a HIB BG, and they're trying to run it 7 nights a week, which I think is great. If Hero leaves the game for whatever reason, there will be somebody to step in. Or those folks that are playing will step from like this super casual, the casual players that run in the Zerg may in fact become a little bit more competitive because they'll be forced to run in 16 slots or 8-mans. Maybe there will be another Zerg leader. BGs are helping the game. Zergs have always been like the focal point of this game, of the large-scale fights. There's so much going on with 8-mans and small mans and duos and solos. That all has to exist in order for that sort of fight dynamic to scale up to the Zerg size. But the reason why you've got these keeps and these relics is in order to have large-scale fights. BGs are the focal point, the center point of the game. I think they always will be. BGs are not going to go away. Zergs are not going to go away anytime soon, if ever. PvP Mordred style event. Yeah. We've talked about on this stream before about how it would be great to have some sort of arena instance that Broadsword builds, very similar to some of how some of the shards and the way some of the shards work, the free shards. By the way, we don't mention free shard names on this stream ever. We can refer to them as like free shards or fake DAoC, but we don't talk about names here. Arlington and I don't know how to pronounce that name. Is that Alcas? Alcas took the Albralix back. Okay, good. I remember the dreaded Khazar Zerg. Khazar still occasionally logs in plays. He hasn't run a Zerg, I think, since he came back. But I still see his name from time to time. A lot less now than I did like 2-3 years ago. But he still comes in every once in a while. Another issue is finding a way to bring players back from the free shard server. Lowering sub price might help. Lowering sub price might help. Also, catering to those players might help. There's a lot of quality of life improvements on Uane that make it a better place to go than some of these free shards. The question is what draws people to free shards? And it's not, I'm going to tell you right now off the bat, it's not just about price. Price is actually not an enormous factor at all. Because the people who are over there had no problem, a lot of those folks who played DAoC for years had no problem paying $15 a month. It's about, and again, on some of these shards where it's classic doesn't always mean like better. People are finding that out. The one advantage that shards have, the one advantage, is that they've got a ragtag group of developers who volunteer, who don't need to be on payroll in order to make it work. And those developers are very talented, but they can do things that corporations and for-profit entities can't. So, you know, stuff can happen differently. Also, they don't have to respect EA's intellectual property. Spoiler alert, they don't already, as it is. So they do things that are, I think, against what Broadsword would ever do to the game in some instances. But what draws people to shards? There's a lot of events, dynamic events that are over there that draw people, right? There's instance fighting, where an instance gets spun up for 8v8 or for PvE events in ways that don't happen over here. So I think that if Broadsword implemented some like crazy dynamic fights that were dev run, like put aside this whole like you're favoring one realm over another, like if you had a dev run event over here once a week that ran all day once a week, and it was like calendared out, or maybe it ran a weekend a month where the devs took turns running it, or maybe they had some veteran players get involved. I think there would be an enormous population uplift on Uane. Huge. Because that's, honestly, to me, like, there are reasons that people play Uane that are for quality of life, or they've just amassed a group of friends over here and those friends haven't left. But there's a lot more here than there is over there. Cybix says, last rant, if this game does make it to Steam, it's going to have to make it noob-friendly. This game is terrible to start from level 1 on. Couldn't think of a game harder, more difficult to start. So, I'm going to tell you that despite what you've probably heard, I don't think Dark Age of Camelot is ever going to make it on Steam. And if it does, it's a long shot. Broadsword has talked about it. The language has changed over the years. Broadsword has said in the beginning that they wanted to put it on Steam. Now that they've said, now the language has changed too. I think, I'm paraphrasing here, it's Steam ready. Just waiting for the right it's EA that's holding it up. It's got to be EA that's holding it up. I can't think of any other reason why it's not on Steam yet, because EA has the Origin Store, which is a competitor to Steam. It's also, it may be low enough on the EA totem pole in terms of priorities that I don't know. It just might not be a priority. But I don't, if it's not on the Origin Store yet, I have a very difficult time believing it's ever going to make it over to Steam. And there's I know EA is now on Steam. That's a relatively new thing. And you know, it's taking time for titles to migrate over. It's the reason it hasn't happened up until this point is, I think, because of Origin. That would be my guess. It's complicated. And I don't know if Steam is the solution to all the problems. Last week or the week before, we talked about there being a huge disadvantage to new players because of the lack of documentation. This game is, I'm not going to say terrible to start from. It just requires a lot of investment and time. Thankfully, there's a huge community that exists that are willing to help people. And it's a matter of connecting them. It's a matter of connecting new players with veteran players, you know, the Realm Advisor system, like, you have to get people into the game and they have to know about it for it to work. And I think Realm Advisors have been broken for quite some time. There is an enormous amount of investment of time and effort and energy into getting into the game. And the documentation, again, I put this more on Mythic, like circa 2010 through 2013, 14, when they had the staff, but didn't put at least I don't think they put a ton of time and effort and energy into updating it. As I've said before, I'm wondering if they were just like, well, it's, this game is now 10 years old. Is it going to last another 10? But over the course of time, so many things have changed, and they just don't have the manpower or woman power. They don't have the people to be able to update it. Carol Beebe, one of the two community managers, and Shilea, they've done an enormous job, a tremendous job in trying to keep stuff as updated as possible, to try and build out guides and tutorials. And there's been huge help from player communities, for people in the community, rather. We lost one of those folks a few weeks ago. Grobo, who passed away, was dedicated to helping build out information for the game. There's a learning curve, but I think the answer is to try and connect people. So how do you get the game in front of more people? I think advertising is probably one way of doing it, but advertising is complicated, and it might not be in the line item budget for Broadsword to do it. How do you get in front of people? I don't know. Origin, maybe. I mean, how many people are going to leave 1-star reviews on Origin or on Steam? It's just a matter of connecting once people are in the game, and I don't know how you get them in. At least people who've never played before. But it's about connecting them with people who have played. And building that network of people who can help one another. Yeah, unfortunately, Grobo passed a few weeks ago. Might have been maybe closer to a month ago. Really, 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 really sad. And very unexpected, too. So, somebody said something about... okay, so crafting is better on the other side, meaning on the free shard. This is the kind of thing that I'm talking about, where they've been able to reinvent some of the systems. But crafting is way more important over on the free shard than it is over on live. They had to improve quality of life, because in Classic, you don't have all of these quest lines with all these custom items. They just don't exist in mass like they do over on Uane. Crafting is way more important on that particular free shard that you're talking about, because you need crafting, you need crafters in order to be able to... It's so much more difficult to get a decent temp, and way more expensive to get a decent temp built out. So that's why the crafting changes were made. Somebody said something about removing limits to EC accounts. EC accounts are a teaser. It's kind of a brilliant thing, and I can kind of recap my thoughts on this. It's just enough to give you a taste of what you're missing. Can you play as EC? Absolutely. Yeah, you sure can. Can you be competitive? Yeah, I think for the most part you probably can be competitive. But the goal of EC, it's a vehicle to get you to sub. That's what EC is. It's not meant to be entirely free to play. It's meant to draw you into becoming to converting you from an EC account to a veteran account. And I'm sure that internally Broadsword looks at those numbers on a pretty regular basis, the conversion rate from EC accounts to sub accounts, to figure out what they could be doing more. Yeah. From a marketing and money-making perspective, EC is perfect. It is. It's actually really well thought out. They could have done a ton of things wrong with EC. And they got most of it right when they launched it, and over time they've perfected it and they've made it a lot better. Two things that would make me resub today: transfer players from one account to another, and transfer plat between realms. Transferring plat between realms, I think, is something that I could actually see happening. That's I haven't heard that idea before, but that's really smart, Cyvex. That's a really great idea. transferring players from one account to another, they've talked about being able to do that. And I think what they said was when they did all of the naming stuff that it would be too complicated to make that happen. I argued that they should, because if it's too technically complicated to make the transferring of players from one account, or tunes from one account to another, that they should charge an astronomical fee, like $50, and do it manually. Have somebody off the side that does it manually, and it could be a profit maker for them. The issue is that by transferring from players from one account to another, you lose out on subs. Because what are people going to do? They're going to take players from all these different accounts, the tunes that they love to play, and they're going to consolidate them, and they're going to essentially cut the revenue down by making that happen. So is it a technical issue? Sure, but it also kills revenue. And Broadswords, I don't think, is in a position. I'm not saying that they're like struggling at all. I don't know I'm sure they're doing great, but I don't think anybody from a business perspective would want to see that happen. But charge me $50, and then forget the items. Just allow me to move. Give me a limit of tunes, or require me to prepay an account for if I'm going to do it. Right? Okay, so allow me to transfer tunes, but make me buy a 6-month or a year game time card to make it happen. That's a solution. I see that as an easy solution. And then just by that additional revenue, then you assign somebody to do the manual work in the sequel backend and just move people over from one to another. Honestly, they could just delete the character, recreate the character on live on an account, and they could, like the CSRs in game, could just change the stats of the player, assign them realm points. It's not okay. So you lose all your items in your plat, but who cares? Another idea: if you have one account, charge me 15. However, only charge me half for another account, like a bot account. Yeah, I think that's also a great idea. But you're cutting down on revenue that exists right now. People are going to have bot accounts whether they pay $10 or $15 or $7 or $15. Family pricing for multiple accounts could be interesting if it's done right, because there are lots of families that actually, in fact, I'm not super experienced in like the gaming universe, right? When it comes to how the sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? How those sort of the family circles, if you will, are. I'm drawing a blank here, but I don't know how many families play games as a whole together. A lot of them have to be MMORPGs, I would guess. But that could be kind of interesting because there are a lot of families that play. What I'm trying to say is there's a lot of families that play DAoC together. I know that to be true. I don't know what it's like outside of the game. Fueled. It's 35 staff. Is it 50 mag, 48 aura, 38 aura? Oh, hold on. I'll tell you right now. By the way, there's a great little tool in the official Twitch, the official Discord, where you could type it in. So staff Mauler is 35 staff, 38 mag, 50 aura. I'll write that down. 35 staff, 38 mag, 50 aura. 50 aura. There we go. And I run a caster Mauler or staff Mauler, and they're super underrated, and more people need to play them. Makes you a better player for playing them. Legan says, you know what I'd like to see? Sup pot timer on the use, 5 minutes. You mean prevent people from reusing sup pots? See, here's my take. You're welcome. Here's my take on things like sup pots and CC. There's too many things that happen in the game so quickly that by putting 5-minute reuse timers on sup pots means that if you shear me, I can only get field buffed. It's how it used to be back in the day. It's how it is on some of the free shards. Like, I get it. That's fine. All good and well. But that fundamentally changes the quality of life balance that Broadsword has sought to bring to Ywain. There are fundamental differences, and it's how it should be. That's an opinion. That's your personal opinion. It's certainly how it used to be. But there's so many things that happen. Like the CC in Dark Age of Camelot, to me, is a little outrageous. There's so many ways to lock people down. Would make shears a lot more desirable. Yes, it would. It would make group setups really interesting. But I think there's been a lot of changes to the game. And you could argue this point with me, that there's been so many changes to the game over the last 5 to 7 years that have made field buffing irrelevant. That if you make that one simple change, you've got to look at a whole bunch of other stuff. I'm not opposed to it. I'm just saying it makes it you got to look at more than just sub pots. It's got to be more than that. So AK Extraterrestrial says, so let's go back for a second if we can to the overwhelming investment required to get involved. Anybody I brought into the game in the past 8 years or so with my help and guidance bails because they feel so far behind from the get-go. How do we combat that? So far behind, it's okay. So it's getting people up and running. It's teaching them the fundamentals of the game. It's not about realm rank or abilities or templates or anything like that. It used to be. But the issue is no longer about getting characters up to speed. It's about getting people up to speed. And I think anybody who starts the game needs to start off in the tutorial zone, needs to run all of the quests, needs to read whatever documentation they can online. But I think they need to actually like PvE. The problem is there's no support system in place for people who PvE on live right now. There really is very little. But in order to learn the game, you have to start from PvE and go from there. That's where the fundamental part, like the basic components of the game are. And if you skip that process, if you skip that entire learning curve with PvE and the tutorials, or the tutorial zone and running quests, and learning about the areas of the game and the certain abilities of characters and letting people try that out in PvE groups, then it's very difficult to get involved. I assume that the people that you brought into the game, for the most part, you've probably thrown them into RVR. That's for me, that's logical, but it is this initial upfront investment in time, willing to put people through the paces, and essentially what is solo play. Right? Because honestly, if anybody starts a new character and brand new and you put them in the tutorial zone and you make them run quests, it's solo play. That's all that it is. You're not going to get groups. The last few groups that I've seen when I've started tunes and tutorial zones have been macro teams. Not a whole lot of advice coming from somebody who's running a macro team. Extraterrestrial says, nah, tutorial zone each and every time till it was cleared. I tried hard to instill this is DAoC, not WoW, go learn. Yeah. I mean, I don't know how you could possibly... So here's one thing. Just an idea. And Broadsword could do this. The community's really involved. Why not start a wiki page? A DAoC wiki, not like the Alakazam, but like a proper wiki. They could host it internally. There's a whole bunch of, I think, whoever does Wikimedia, right, has, I think they've got a whole backend that you can just like take. Create a wiki and allow players to contribute. And there would be tons of people that would be willing to do this. But build a wiki for the game. And allow it to be contributed by players. Because the Herald is great, and it requires a lot of work to just even to just do this basic newsletter. And don't get me wrong, like this is really nice. But this newsletter, as like, I mean, there's a lot of content here, but it takes a ton of time to build this. And I don't know, you would have to ask Beeb, but I don't think Beeb is like a full-time employee at Broadsword. Nor do I think Leah is. I don't know that for a fact, but like there's just limited manpower. You gotta, yeah. Like this. So let me open that up real quick. How do I open that up without going? Yeah, so this is not a great site to use as an example. But yes. I suppose like this. But so this exists, but it's run by fandom.com. It's not run by Broadsword, and my fear is that the community puts in, first off, there's ads for all these other games, but you put all this effort in, and then fandom takes it offline. That's also, by the way, one of my biggest fears about going, and I'm not going to, but one of my biggest fears about going to a free shard is that free shards population tends to drop, or they stop getting supported, or interest is lost. At least if I know I'm paying $15 a month, that there's probably a better chance that this, like, my character and all the hard work that I put in will outlast it. And it's the same thing for the wiki page. But that'd be great. They should do that. Cybix says, here's an idea. What about a zone where all realms can PvE together until like level 40? I know this might sound dumb, just thinking outside the box with this low pop going to take something. Technically, it's a possible thing to do. It is. Broadsword can fairly easily change the rule sets for particular areas. I don't know if they've copy-pasted, if they copy-paste rule sets for things like events on Pendragon, where they're like the 1v1s, the 3v3s. I think they might just have a template that they work off of. I don't know if I think they changed the whole server over to, if I recall correctly, they changed the whole server rule set over. But absolutely they could do that. That's a phenomenal idea, Cybex. They've got to shrink. One of the things that I think doesn't get touched on enough. Broadsword needs to shrink the game. It stinks because there's so much that happens, or at least funnel people into a particular area. There's so much beautiful art, and I'm releasing a video series coming up next week that goes into a lot of the beautiful PvE areas and these dead zones that Cybex talks about. I'm going through and doing like a top encounter, top like beautiful artwork for each realm video that's going to be available to Patreon members, and I'll probably do some teasers for the public for free on YouTube. But they just have to shrink the game. So by creating maybe a smaller area where everybody can PvE together until level 40 or something like that, that makes a lot of sense. And you've got to incentivize people to PvE. You've got to incentivize people to group or force them into a group. You go into that zone to PvE, you're automatically forced into a group. And you have to learn to work together. And there's somebody on hand, maybe a realm advisor list or something. There's somebody on hand to help you if you need help. It's not just download Discord. It's in-game chat. There are people who volunteer to be helpers who are willing to help in the game to help people out. Yeah, TOA is not a good example. So Fueled says, look at TOA, a lot of encounters are broken, MLs are broken, and no one is ever there besides 30 to 36 or running what are now BP quests, right? TOA is gorgeous, but TOA is very broken. And I don't think it's going to get fixed anytime soon, if ever. Don't think there's a priority to do it, right? And also, that code hasn't been touched in, I would guess, a very long time. The people who built TOA, and those are very complex zones and encounters, probably some of the most complex in the game. Very difficult. So, they did get away. Yeah, they did do away with the team leads. There's no more team leads, no more knights. And I think that's, again, just it's probably just a manpower issue. I hate saying manpower because the two community managers are women, and they're amazing at what they do. The person power involved is just a lot. But this is the thing. There are a lot of community members that are willing to step up and help. Grobo was people power. There you go. Grobo was one example of a lot of people that helped and that continue to help. But you've got what if you're going to solve the problem of building out all this documentation, right? You've got to first, like, there has to be a reason why you embark on a project like that. And if you're not getting new people into the game who have never played before, or people that played 20 years ago that come back just because they're interested, if there's not this huge demand for it, then the resources are probably better spent elsewhere. But, I mean, I'm one example of many. I'm not alone here. I run ads for Dark Age of Camelot on Facebook. Maybe not directly for the game, for the stream, but any ad that mentions DAoC has any text about DAoC at all is exposure. And I'm not the only one that does that. There are other people that run ads. Some people, in fact, there's one person that pretends to be Dark Age of Camelot and actually pays for ads on Facebook. I've seen them. That has a page where they like copy paste, and whoever's doing this, like I think I don't think anybody's upset with you. Maybe other than EA, potentially EA, but you're doing a great thing. But there is somebody that actually runs paid ads on Facebook as if they are the game. And I've not been able to find out who it is. I've asked the person, they just said they're just a fan of the game. But I run ads for my stream and therefore the game. There are a bunch of Twitch streamers that are now coming on that are spending more time Twitch streaming from the live servers. But just getting MMORPG to write an article, or MMO World, or whatever that website's called, or getting an article on Kotaku, that's how you pronounce I think that's how you pronounce the website. That's all great, but it's not enough. And I still think, though, that the Broadsword folks should launch a wiki site, and they should allow the community. They should build out a very basic structure, and they should allow the community to contribute. And assign, just like they do for Discord, assign some mods that can help clean it up. Okay, enough about that. What other questions do you guys have? Do you want to talk about what? The current balance? Bammers has probably fallen asleep on us here. But I would imagine, because he's got to be working really early. In fact, I don't see him here on the list. But he was talking about class balance, which I think was kind of an interesting conversation to have. We were talking specifically about Maulers. Bammers has to work at 3 in the morning, he said. So he should be in bed in order to get some rest before he has to go to work at 3, which is early. We're talking about class balance, and Maulers came up, and we're talking about just as an example, changing the damage types on caster Maulers. I don't think they need to be changed. I think they're fine the way they are. But we started talking about the cloak, the Staff Mauler cloak, or not the Staff Mauler cloak, the cloak for Mauler. On all 3 realms, it's a matter debuff. And that makes sense if you're a fist wrap. It's matter, right? I think I'm saying that right. It's a matter debuff. It's great if you're a fist wrap Mauler. But if you're a caster Mauler, it does absolutely nothing for you. If you're on Hib or on mid. And one of the small changes they could make is introducing loyal cloaks for Maulers that have the correct stat debuff on them. At least one of the 2 for each realm. Maybe don't make it the primary debuff train or the primary assist train for staff Maulers. Make it like on Hib, make it heat instead of energy. I would prefer it be energy, but probably for the game it should be heat. And what is it? Spirit on mid. Yeah. Or cold. One of the 2. I'm You mentioned on your Duo stream about the game is hosted and why lag is such a noticeable thing. Yes. So the game is, all of the hosting, Spirit Cold Energy on mid, thank you. What is the less used energy train that Maulers, do Maulers get Spirit and Cold, right? But which one is it that's less used? I think is it Spirit or Cold that's less used? Anyway, you can answer that in chat. The game is hosted on Amazon EC2 servers or EC2 instances. And those instances can be scaled up or down. At least the hardware, the amount of hardware that is on these EC2 instances can be scaled up or down depending on what kind of population or what kind of demand is being put on the game. They can scale those up and down in real time based on population. I don't know if they have to. I assume they have to bring the server down in order to change the instance type. Some of these platforms that I don't know, I have limited experience with EC2, but I think you have to bring, if you're running as an EC2 instance, I think you have to bring it down. You can scale, if you're using like Elastic Beanstalk and stuff, you can scale a little bit easier. I think you can scale the database resources a little bit easier, but in terms of the actual game itself, the server, I believe they have to take it down in order to scale it. But they have in fact made changes, fairly noticeable changes to instance types over the last couple of years. There was an instance with some lag, right? And I assume they fixed it because the only explanation that I can come up with on how they fixed it is by scaling. I don't know if the game is... I know that there is server code out there that allows you to have different IP addresses for regions. So I don't know if if each region needs to have its own server. I don't think that's the case. Some of the custom server stuff that I've seen written, the folks from DOL that built out a lot of this custom server stuff, they can separate regions by threads. So they can have individual threads or threads, not cores, but threads per region. So anytime somebody goes into like TNN, there's a new thread that's opened. I don't know how the internals, like the production server works, but DOL is written that way. I would imagine the server code hasn't. I mean, the base of the server hasn't changed a whole lot. Nor has the client. The client's changed very little. Very little change to the client at all. Over maybe the last 14 years. And so back in the day, there's actually a great story about how Mythic got their servers to begin with. I don't know if you guys know this story, but Mythic was so new that they actually didn't have the credit required. I think they went to Dell, and they didn't have the credit required to buy or to lease or finance all of these servers. And so I think one of the heads of Mythic had to like put their own personal credit on the line, or they paid cash for it. They had to do something crazy in order to buy all these servers. There was no Amazon. There was no, you co-located servers in data centers, but you couldn't just spin up an instance like you can now. So the servers, I know, written in a way that allows you to spread out the amount of demand to different machines. I just don't know how they do it now. But they could very easily scale this up to, if there were 5,000 players tomorrow, they could very easily scale that up and commit the amount of resources required to be able to do it. It also makes running the game super cost effective because you're just paying for resources used and bandwidth and storage, right? So PvE server, what's the population like? Yeah, so yeah, Quasi's here. And Pronder, do you also play, Gay Harris? I know Quasi does on a fairly regular basis. There's still a huge community, and it seems a lot bigger than it actually is when you go over there, because all of the Garrus folks are all part of a very tight-knit group. So there's a website. What is it? Somebody's going to post it. It's Rob's Geharris site. That is a forum that's very active. I think they do have their own. They have a Discord channel, or at least a Discord place where they spend a lot of time together. Geharris.net. Thank you, Quasi. There's this huge community. So when you go over there, there's not a lot of people logged in compared to like Yuan, compared to the PvP rule set, but there's always somebody there that's willing to help you out. The bigger issue about Geharris is that it really requires, because of the population size, it requires you to multi-box. And if you don't have the hardware to do it, it's not as easy to get set up and rolling. Especially if you want to play on your own, it really requires you to multi-box for the most part, or at least to have a few accounts running at once. But it's super rewarding. It's pretty cool over there. If you've never been, you get unfettered access to all of the zones, right? It's very much like Mordred used to be, but there's no RVR. There's a few people who solo over there. That's great, but I would imagine it would require more investment if you want to like play on a consistent basis, right? To have multiple, you really need to have multiple accounts. You could solo, but you're not going to be able to do anywhere near as much without having support or a group. Yeah, like I admit, I'm just looking back up in chat. I miss my catacomb zones, but it feels much better. It feels so much better to be where other players are. I do think nuking SI, etc. Catacombs, I miss Catacombs a lot. I'm really sad that Catacombs is gone, but I think there was a technical reason why they pulled Catacombs down in order to be able to insert curse stuff. I don't know if they've repurposed the zone and like just changed the jump points in the zone. I don't know exactly how they built out cursed. I'm not sure how that all works on live. I think the zone still exists. At least I've been told that if you have a tune that's bound there, and I think you can bind, right? That you can still get in there. Correct me if I'm wrong, please, somebody. I was pretty certain that there were some folks that were still bound in catacombs that could still get down there. But I've not personally been down there since the change, since they inserted. The zone exists. I'm wandering around a totally vacant burial grounds right now. Yeah, if you're bound, you can get in there. So they didn't repurpose the zone. But the portal boundaries are non-functional, so you'll fall out of the map. Okay. So they reused... So the portal boundaries are non-functional, so we fall out of the map. I assume that they did that. They just reused some of the jump points. It's not super hard to put new jump points in, but... there had to have been a reason. Right, and it's not just about focusing PvE. I mean, there's so many dungeons that exist. It's not about funneling people into a particular area. It might be there may have been, because of the currency change when they switched over to BPs, it may be a huge lift to try and remap or redo that entire zone and all the mobs within the zone to drop like updated currency or drop BPs or something. I mean, I know they did it for DF. They changed DF around a little bit, but most of that was higher level mobs. There's like a handful of them. That might also be the reason why. A dev supposedly can port you there. Yeah, I mean, if the zone still exists, it's not difficult to bring people there. A dev can go to, whether they go to they go to a new zone ID, like they can go to the zone ID, they can go to a particular player at any point in the game anywhere. Beeb can type in on her manager. She's got, I don't know if they title it like GM admin. I think there's different tiers of access. But in terms of like she can just type in a / command and go anywhere that she needs to. She can go to a particular player. In fact, oftentimes you'll notice on the stream, and you might be able to catch her interface where she's going in and out of the interface. but she's got macros set up for particular players, and she can just, it's a slash command to get over, and essentially it drops her on a particular person. The new BP system is 100% why they've not brought it back. Yeah. So I think there's a couple of takeaways here. They can also teleport to an active ticket submitter. Okay, there you go. Yeah, I know that they that there's a system involved. The appeals system has a fairly robust back end to be able to move things around. I think they've changed some of it though recently to force people to go to Discord, right? I think they've changed some of the bug reporting, like the way in which bug reports are handled. But the appeals process is actually quite cool, like at least the way it used to work. I imagine that some of that has been changed. What other things do we want to talk about? I've still got time. I've got plenty of time. Usually these things last for an hour and a half or 2 hours. We'll try and keep it under 2 hours tonight, but talking about teleporting. CSRs do exist. They are out there. They have the ability to be able to see things in ways that can indicate as to whether somebody is hacking through line of sight. They've got special tools be able to built in so that they can see things that we can't. They see it in a completely different manner. So CSRs, they also have access to reports. They can pull reports. There's all sorts of stuff that they get into, and this is why this nonsense. So one of the things about fly hacking, right? Movement exploits are, there's very few things that you can still do to the game because most of the stuff has been patched over the course of time. But things like movement exploits are, unfortunately, they still exist because that's controlled client side. We've talked about, I think on the first ever state of the game, we talked a little bit about that. Broadsword has Z-axis, like they have reporting to see whether like a character has exceeded a particular Z-axis. So anytime that kind of thing happens or somebody exceeds a particular speed that they shouldn't, because there's a numerical value for speed, that's a fairly easy thing to get to. So speed hacking and fly hacking and stuff doesn't really happen a whole lot anymore because as soon as it happens, people get caught. They also, the client has for years and years and years have detection for packet sniffing. Now, I don't know if there's ways around that. I don't even want to go into that because I will tell you right now that the last thing you want to do is cheat. The last thing you want to do is exploit because A, that means that you have a small thing, more than likely, and you're making up for it. And B, also because it's just not the right thing to do. But there's been a recent example. We opened up the stream talking about somebody who got caught. Don't do it. It's dumb. Really dumb. Because you will get caught, whether it's by the community, by a CSR, by Carol, who then has to write it up and send it in, I would imagine, because there's a separate team that deals with actions on accounts. Carol will tell you time and time again, she's not a CSR. Other people that do that kind of work. But you don't want to get caught exploiting. And Broadsword does, in fact, have detection methods in place. Does radar exist? I mean, there's probably a custom radar app that exists out there that is able to do things, and I'm not going to talk about methods, but you could, I guess, if you had the knowledge, the programming knowledge, to build radar, but it doesn't exist at a wide scale like it used to. Those days are long gone. If people are radaring, they're doing it in such small numbers that it literally does not make a difference in the game. Does it still exist is the question, because it definitely used to. I have no reason to believe that it's completely gone. But I will tell you that people who cheat are far and few between. You got a community now that has been around, a lot of us have been around for 15, in my case, 19 years. A lot of people have been around for 19 years, been there since the start of the game. We can kind of spot things that don't exactly look right. Whether it's kill spam in a region that doesn't quite look right, whether it's spotting something. Sometimes we get it wrong when it's lag and we actually, we think it's a movement exploit and it's actually a lag, and then we blame somebody that we shouldn't. Sorry, Toonses. But you could radar. But the likelihood of doing it, the amount of knowledge required, there's a very small number of people that could do something like that. It just doesn't happen. It exists. The original creator's banned years ago. He still maintains it, but he charges like $100 for a license. I've heard that. I have no proof that actually is true. No proof. I don't, at least. And I've done a lot of like trying to figure out, right? I've done a lot of like digging to try and figure out like how stuff works. I've reported a lot of geometry exploits to Broadsword. There's a lot of stuff that I do on the back end to try and get to a deeper level of understanding for the game. And I've never found this person. I mean, I know who you're talking about. I know clearly who you are, but I've not found any proof that person is actively maintaining it and still charging for a license. I could be wrong about that. I very well might be. Remember the big suspension a month after New Frontiers when they clamped down on radar use. So one of the ways, without doing detection client-side for packet sniffing, right? One of the easiest way to catch radar users is to put essentially what is like a false flag. To put what is a fake character, if you will, or a dev that appears as a character, but doesn't have a model assigned to them. So they show up as blank. The client doesn't know what to render, so it just shows nothing. Radar will pick up on those folks, even if they don't have, because the other client hasn't yet. Oh, Calibrex, thank you for the 7 months. Greatly appreciate that. Thanks. It doesn't necessarily have to have a model. The radar, it doesn't necessarily need to see a model in order to be able to show that person on the radar. So, long story short, a lot of radar users have been caught by CSRs essentially putting people that don't exist in the game, or tunes that don't exist in the game, more or less. Kind of a really simplistic way of explaining it, but and then people who have radar run towards them, like sprint towards them, and then they disappear, and then they move the person. And if that happens after X amount of times, and it's clear that they're radaring, then it's a ban, or a suspension, or whatever you want to call it, right? It's not a bug that allows radar to still exist. It's not a bug. It's damn near impossible to completely prevent people from doing this because of the way the client is written. It's almost impossible. I think probably impossible to prevent it outright. But they've made it so friggin' difficult. Broadsword's done a great job of tamping people's ability to cheat down to where I don't think it matters. And a lot of the people who accused other players of cheating, those folks were oftentimes the people who were like, they were radaring, they saw us through a wall, there's no way. So they're either modifying textures, or they were exploiting using the RAM bug where they dropped a RAM or were on a boat and zoomed all the way out and could now see over walls, or could now see, you know, through like the entire clip range, could now see people that they shouldn't have been able to see because they were like up at 5,000 feet. Broadsword in 1.127 fixed that by eliminating or fixing that, what I thought was probably an intentional, like the ability to zoom out at some point because people were exploiting it. And now that you can't do that anymore, you can't zoom all the way out and get a camera angle like you used to be able to on a boat. So that's gone. Lagdar still exists. Yeah, unfortunately, Lagdar is always going to exist. And no matter how much money I spend on this gaming PC that I built in July, this is like an i7 9700K. I now have an RTX 3080, 32 gigs of RAM. I almost get lag more. I can notice it more on this machine. It's way more playable on this than my old Alienware laptop. It's way more playable, and I can do a lot more at the same time. But I can smell it from a mile away. Yeah, I know your PC is better than mine, and I rarely notice any lag at all. I don't know if it's better than yours, Ollie, but yeah. Why don't you? So explain what you're talking about. F11 fun and games. A lot of us refer to that as tab targeting. You could F11, I guess, is that the default? Or drop the cam, dropping the camera. Oh, F11, that's what you mean. Yeah, you can absolutely drop camera. I don't know why anybody would use that in the game right now, unless you're doing something that you shouldn't necessarily be doing. It was a feature that was put into place for, I think, it is useful, but here's the thing though, once you're out of clip range, those people don't show up. So you could absolutely auto stick and hide, but once you're out of clip range, there's absolutely nothing you can do. Because your client doesn't render players. Even if you dropped your camera, it's about where your current character location is, not where your camera location is. That's how the client sees it. Roof of Keep Palantones to aim at the hibcatas in the courtyard. Good for spying on gated door. I'm not talking 2,300 units. You're talking about, okay, I got you. You're talking about closer numbers than that. Yeah. It's great. I don't think it's an exploit, but I also, I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe it is. I'm sure there's a lot of useful reasons. I very rarely, if ever, drop my camera. Very rarely, if ever. Maybe just because I don't think a whole lot about it. I know it exists. I've done it a million times. I don't think to do it to gain an advantage. I don't know. Use it in your bomb group sometime. So I haven't been able to compile enough evidence to report it, but I've come across an interesting hack or some sort of cheat exploit playing a Nightshade a few weeks ago, and there was a hunter I kept perfing and instantly LDing. Happened again with a Merc. Never anyone else happened multiple times the same night. I've been trying to figure out what's causing it and how to actually prove whether or not it's malicious or not a network failure. So playing a Nightshade a few weeks ago, and there was a hunter I kept perfing and instantly LDing. Okay, so here's the question. LDing meaning that the character was, or the toon was still at the same Z-axis that they were when you perf them, but their health bar went blank and you were still able to kill them? Or did they completely disappear? What did their health... I think the biggest thing is, what did their health bar look like and where did the character actually end up? Because that tells me a lot about what was occurring. No, I mean... Oh, you went LD. No. No, I can't think of anything that would cause that to happen. I can't think of anything. Because there's very limited amounts of data that are sent between the client and the server. Very specific stuff. And you can't push stuff to other people that isn't already in their client, right? Like, you can't push updated models, or you can't tell the client that you are I mean, my first guess would be like, well, you just like, you screw with the models enough to where it would cause somebody to crash, but that is not communicated from the client to the server and then from the server to somebody else. That's all local. I can't think of anything that would cause that. I can't think of anything that would. I don't know if it's a network failure, right? I don't know. It could be that something's happening on your end that is like maybe that hunter is using an effect or using some kind of effect that renders improperly on your machine that causes you to crash. But wouldn't be on the hunter. That would be on your... I would try, if that still happens or you see that happening again, I'd try uninstalling Dark Age of Camelot, completely clearing out all those folders, reinstalling the game from the ground up, and see if it still happens. Because that, I don't know how anybody would exploit using that. I mean, I get that it's frustrating, but I can't think of a reason why that would happen. If it always happens when you do a specific thing that crashes, it sounds like something in your end, maybe your driver failing. Yeah, it could be. Can we talk about snares like pin? Do all snares have no immunity time, or just pin, or only some? So pin is a completely different thing. Pin is totally different. Pin is on its own timer. Mauler snares and pin, I think, are the only two that aren't affected by other snares. And it's not all the Mauler snares. I think it's just the cone. I think it's just it's a 90-degree cone, I think. There may be an item proc, but I'm talking about styles or spells that characters get. There might be a proc that's different that I'm not aware of. But pin, by the way, is way underutilized, as are maybe most tanks that peel. But I'm fairly certain that most of these snares share their immunity, except for pin and the 90-degree Mauler cone, and maybe the castable Mauler, like the pulsing one too. I do not know about summoning AoE, the SM AoE snare. All of the realms have a class that DD snares. So on at least the ones that I'm aware of, on Hib it's Eld, right? On Mid it's SM AoE. It's a DD snare, right? And then on Alb it's Earth Wizard. And those do, I believe those do share. No, you're not talking about that. You're talking about just on Mid it's okay. Also underutilized would be the AoE DD snare, which I use a lot to either to be able to extend away or to try and suppress people pushing. PB AoE is different than AoE. So this is a PB AoE snare? I'm not saying, I don't know if you're talking about on Mid. The Eld, the Wizard, the Earth Wizard, the and whatever spec Eld it is. Is it mana? Is not a PBAE. There's a single target DD snare and an AoE DD snare. I don't know if that's the one that you're talking about on SM. Oh, okay. Gotcha. Oh, okay. So I don't know about the SM PBAE snare, but there's a lot of people in here that play Mid that could probably tell you. I don't know. I think that we've got to we need to at some point spend more time as a game, as a community, talking about proper group setups and talking about what classes fit and what combinations of classes can be used to build a proper group on each realm. We should probably do a very basic stream at some point talking about that and how to use these abilities and how they interact with one another. Because on Hib, it's really easy. Bard, Warden, Druid, and then a combination of other, depending on if you want to run a train or not. On Alba, it's a little more complicated. On Mid, I think it's even more complicated. But we should probably at some point talk about that, right? I would think. Maybe we'll save that. Maybe we'll invite some folks for the next state of the game, and we'll spend the first chunk of it talking about group setups on all 3 realms. AK Extraterrestrial says that'd be really helpful. It's been almost a decade since I played consistently, and the comps are nothing like I remember. It's true, they've changed quite a bit. Especially, I would say, in the last 4 years, things have changed quite a bit. 5 years, whenever speed changed, and whenever healers and sorks and was it channers were given speed 6, it completely changed. It had a ripple effect, a domino effect on group compositions across the entire game, because people were playing then. Support classes had, people were playing different specs. It was just completely different. Yeah, Scalds, Minstrels, they all got completely wrecked. Even though they're still as important, they're maybe more important than they used to be, just because of on some of these realms. I mean, Scalds, so Mid's done a much better job with Scalds than they had even just 6 months ago. There are way more Scalds now in RVR than there used to be. Minstrels, on the other hand, are still so underutilized. Well, Scalds got hurt, but I mean, healers are like the toolkit in the game. There's so much utility and so many different ways to play a healer. Scalds got hurt a lot, but the thing that killed Alb, I think, in part, was this idea that you could be really lazy and not have a minstrel in the group, because then you just there's so much utility and there's so many interrupts and additional damage and all sorts of other stuff that you lost by not running a minstrel in the group. Hib didn't get affected by it really at all, because if you don't have a Warden or Druid, you're running a Bard in the group who can also back up heal. I'm looking at ticks right now. I don't know off the top of my hand, but I'm gonna look right now. So it is a spec. So tick healing spec is they have to spec rejuve. So you got flexible, crush, and shields, and then rejuve and enhancements. They do get a lot of skill points to be able to split amongst them, but still, it is a primary spec. You've got a spec in it. There are baseline heals. So you don't have to spec rejuve in order to get baseline heals. But if that's what you're asking, it's primary heals. No, it's not at the level of primary heals. The amounts are not anywhere near as high that they need to be in order to be a primary healer. It's very similar effectiveness to a bard. In fact, I think arguably bards could probably heal harder than ticks could. I don't know if that's the case. So the level 43 spec rejuve is a 396 delve. Yeah. So bards arguably heal way higher, like double, because the single target heal, spec heal for bards is 667. So they're very much not a viable. I mean, they're good for backup, but they're probably the answer, like the answer to bards having heals, right, is to create a hybrid class on Alb that can also heal. But so Cleric, Friar, Tick, yes, Cleric, Friar, Tick. Although Friars have some pretty solid heals. Friar top line heal is 667. Cleric is 667. No, they're the same. Clerics and Friars have the same delve. 667. It's a 2-second cast. Uses 99 power. 2-second cast. It's the same. Friars and Clerics have the same spec heal. Uses a ton of power, though. Yeah. Should we talk about Staff Friars? That's probably the next tune I roll out solo. I have a nearly Roam rank 10. I think it's 9L8, 9L9 Staff Friar that has a cursed temp and like is super modern that I've been itching to play and just haven't had a chance to do it yet. But I'm going to get back on Staff Friar and play some Staff Friar a little more. Staff Friars, by the way, minstrels need to be invited into Alb groups, or minstrels need to be required in most Alb groups. Staff Friars need to be welcome. Nobody wants a Staff Friar in the group, or very few groups want Staff Friars. I think, does Pale Horse run one? I think Pale Horse might have a Staff Friar, but they're very few and far between, and they're phenomenal in the group. They're even better in small mans. Because there's so much that they can do, especially if you probably shouldn't spec 50 staff, but if you do spec 50 staff and you get excommunicate, that group heal for landing a follow up on it any time is really nice. And whatever the initial style in order to get to excommunicate also puts a hot on you on the Friar. Great class. Don't talk to me as to why they changed celerity around. I don't. That's sore spot still. Staff Friars were menaces. Staff Friar was my first character in the game. On Nemu. My first character. My first character on the after beta. I do want to talk about one other thing that irks me. That Bammers and I sort of ended up getting in a roundabout conversation earlier about this specific thing. Who remembers Minstrels and the Frozen Harp? When that harp launched, it had an egg, an AoE res. And after, I want to say it was some months, maybe 6 months, some amount of months, they decided that Broadsword decided that they were going to remove that and instead put a resist buff up that did not stack with the resist song of Minstrels. I'm not griefing about what they replaced it with. I want to talk about problem solving. And this might be the last thing we talk about unless somebody else has a topic. It's my belief that Broadsword nerfed the harp egg because stealth groups were using it, because they also almost at the identical time or at some point very close to when they nerfed the harp egg, they also removed or killed the ability for stealthers to spec in the champ res. And it was, I think they ended up removing the harp egg on Minstrel because there were stealth groups that were egging each other up in fights. If that ends up being a problem, if you implement something, and this is like just a personal opinion of mine, but if you implement something in the game, like a mini egg, because you think that there's not enough reses on Alb, and you think that, or maybe that's something that will attract more people to play Minstrel, and you give them an egg, and then find out that it's not being used in the way that you had initially thought it would be, which happens all the time. Population bonuses are another thing. The display of population bonuses, Broadsword thought was going to do one thing, and it had another effect. It happens all the time. It's not Broadsword's fault. But just because they didn't know that stealth groups were going to abuse it doesn't mean I think they should have pulled it off the class. Does it mean that you're kind of throwing poo in the face of stealthers by saying, yeah, you're the problem? I suppose, yeah, like by killing the egg entirely instead of saying, you know what, we're just not going to allow it to apply to stealthers. I think you avoid that confrontation with the stealth community. But I personally, I think the right approach would be instead to say, hey, you know what, we're noticing like this was not as we intended. Not only do we take champ res away from stealthers, but we're also just not going to let the minstrel egg apply to other stealth players because it's not how it was intended. This is one of those things that I haven't thought about for years that Bammer's brought up. It is totally like an old, a little bit of grief that I've got that I never addressed, that I never I never went out and found help for this problem that I have, where I'm just like really upset. No, I think that there are other ways to solve problems. Well, with the full stealth group dynamic, could have been adjusted to give him and mid-stealth a support option. Possible also being used to egg whole regular groups inside of keeps on keep takes. So instead of climbing classes, you could have whole groups inside. That's true. I never thought of that. That's absolutely could be. But that whole group would have to die first. I guess you could all sit down and die on guards. So don't make it available inside of, I mean, maybe put a limitation on it. You can't use, that ability can't be used on ramparts, or can't be used in courtyards or outside the inner of a keep. I mean, I'm sure it's possible to be able to limit it. That could be. I never thought of that being the reason. Never thought. Or maybe here's a solution. You can't spec high enough in stealth to get climb and also be able to use the res. You have to be at wherever the climb is. Z-axis limit. Yeah. Z-axis limit. Absolutely. Or you could have just said, minstrels maybe can't spec, if you spec high enough in stealth to get climb, you're no longer allowed to use it. But CL res, right, didn't solve the problem though, right? Because you're exactly what you're saying about CL res. Yep. Because heavy tanks or climbing tanks can still climb in and they can still use CL res. Yeah. So it didn't solve the problem. Perfect subject for a DAoC meeting. That one time where they nerfed that harp. I'm still not over it. I haven't slept in 3 years because that egg is gone. The population bonus is another thing. Like, I think as part of this change, they should pull the display of population bonus out of the game entirely. It should exist, maybe in some way, shape, or form, but it shouldn't be displayed. Because other than maybe IRC and other competitive 8-mans, I don't think it's done anything but maybe hurt the people that are actually willing to log in and play. Because the second you see that, and you're on an underpopulated realm, you're immediately discouraged from doing anything. I don't think you should be able to see what the bonus is. I don't even know if the bonus does anything at all. Like, what's the point? You're not getting people over to underpopulated realms. People aren't, other than, again, competitive 8-mans, they're not switching. Just get rid of it. Yeah, mids were at 70% when I logged in, was prepared for misery. Who wants that feeling? Just get rid of the bonuses entirely. I don't think they do anybody any good anymore. The idea was solid. You're going to try and convince people that they should, because you can't put in realm timers because they don't work. At least at this level of population, they don't work. You're trying to convince people or encourage them to go to an underpopulated realm, but nobody cares enough. If you did like 500% RPs, or you did some and again, I would not, because I don't know how it would work in the real world. But if you did some astronomical number that was just like completely bonkers, that might work. But still, don't display it to people. Don't give them ammo. All right. Any last topics of discussion? What about bonus points in a zone? So like zone specific RP bonuses? That would work as long as it's equally applied. There is a question about how you support soloers and how you support small mans right now. Oh, I see what you're saying. Like the Dragon Keep or the Ghost Keep, right? We got four times the RPs on a bug, but all the action was there for all realms. I remember maybe close to a decade ago, there was a bug at a fight at Glenlock where somebody made like 3 million RPs on one fight at Glen. Was that at Fens or was that Glen? I remember it just happened like once that I've ever seen in the game. There's this question about how you support soloers, and I think that's really like where it might have been Glen. I was there for that fight. If you're talking about that I was there for that fight. There were a handful of people that got a ton of RPs. Somebody made like 3 million RPs in like one fight. I know it didn't stick. They had to have reversed it because it was absolutely wild, but I remember that, if that's the one you're talking about. I was there for that. It dates you and I, right, about how long we've been playing this game for. And it might have been just a decade ago. It certainly wasn't any longer than that. It was fairly recent. We need to find a way to support soloers and small mans in the game. We've got to find a way to support 8-mans in the game. I don't think 8-mans need as much encouragement, but soloers and small mans need to have some encouragement to be able to go out and fight and not get zerged down. And I don't think you create special zones for, unless you want to do like instance fighting, which is cool, and I think you should be able to do that. I don't think you should be able to earn RPs. I think Broadsword should create an environment where solo or small mans and 8-mans can go compete against one another and they get no reward for it other than the title of winning. But what kinds of bonuses do you provide to soloers and small mans to encourage them to go out? How do you prevent that bonus? How do you prevent BGs from splitting up into groups of 4 in order to get that bonus and all run together at the same time? Those are questions that I've had for a while now about how to make it work. Dueling grounds with open chat. Well, I mean, there are shards that exist that are built for this purpose. And unfortunately, IRC has left for those shards because of hero stream sniping them. They haven't left entirely, like they're still around, but when they want that kind of playing, they actually leave Yuane and they go somewhere else. And I don't think it's a ton of work for Broadsword to provide that same kind of service to competitive groups or competitive players, whether it's solo, small, 8, whatever. I don't think it's a super heavy lift, and I think Broadsword needs to do it sooner rather than later, because if somebody else has opened that up and it's free, people are going to go there, especially if if there's no ability to get sniped. You can build it on Yuane, just don't award people RPs for it. They're doing it for another reason entirely. They're these setup fights, these draft fights that happen, they don't do it to make RPs. They do it to see who's better. I think Broadsword knows that. The problem with having a small man zone is there's now less people in the RVR zone, which is why I don't think there shouldn't be a small man zone. I think it's fine to create an instance in which people are able to go in and fight one another and have like open dialogue and open chat and have these setup fights where they're dropped into an area or an instance where they can battle it out. There's a great example of this on a shard right now that I will not name. Great example of this. But the way in which you keep people in the active RVR zones is you just don't reward them anything for going to this other place. You just allow them to go duel it out. Like a dueling grounds, I think, is a great way to describe it. Because when you duel, you don't really get anything out of it, right? Other than pride. I think you have to have bonuses for small mans. Bonuses for soloers. I mean, increase the bonus for soloers that can kill multiple other players at the same time, for instance. You know, you get a 1v2 or something. Just there's got to be a way to encourage people to go out and play. Don't nerf Zerg RPs. That's the wrong answer. You do that, you're going to lose people who play Zergs. You don't want to create conditions where people leave or people get upset. Especially if there's other less confrontational ways to fix the problem. I think you just, you increase the RP gain, or there's something else that happens with soloers and small mans where they're incentivized to run alone. And that there are checks and balances in place to make sure that BGs and Zergs aren't abusing it in order to get the incentives that the soloers and small mans have. Calibrick says, if I recall correctly, they give incentives to grouping by giving bonus to XP and RPs. They do. They do, but there's definitely like the amount of RPs awarded. I think this was addressed in a grab bag recently, right? Where they talked about RP, how RPs are awarded. I think it was in a grab bag recently. But you have to, like, besides, I think it's fine to give bonuses to people that group together. I just think there should be a higher bonus than there is currently for people that are soloing and small manning. Because the risk is a lot higher. It should be worth, I mean, it is already, you're making a lot more RPs per kill than you are in a group. You know, you can earn with a 50% RP pot and a server bonus, and depending on what realm rank you are with the bug bonus as well, the bug pot bonus, you can make close to 10k a kill as a soloer. But as soon as the server bonuses go away, or if you can't afford a 50% RP pot, it's a lot less than that. So solo quests are great. The dailies are a great thing, you know. They can be abused, as we've seen recently. I don't think that's a common issue. I'm just saying. But I think there's probably another way to do it. In addition to that. Also, this, you know, it is, the solo zones are absolutely out in New Frontiers, but it kills me to see 8-mans and Zergs running through solo zones. If it's red, it's dead. I get it. Whatever. It's your $15. Play how you want. You know, it's all good. But it personally, like, it pains me a bit to see a Zerg or an 8-man run through. The only time I think I've ever been in a solo zone with more than 2 or 3 people in the last few years is actually just, it was on the stream as of about 2 weeks ago, where a bunch of Hib stealthers said that there was a mid group or mid small man, I think it was like maybe just shy of 8, that was camping the Alb solo zone, and they asked us to go in and clean it up, and all we did is went in and we killed the mids, like the Vizzy group that was sitting and camping and killing solars. Not everyone considers them solo zones, though. Even Broadswords does not say that they are solo zones. That's fair. That's fair. Everything in New Frontiers is fair game to Broadsword. That makes sense. Because you don't want to... like... Well, because if you started calling it a solo zone or creating rules that would prevent people from going in there, it opens the door to everybody else saying, well, what about me? What if I can't get my own zone? Or, you know, why are they so special? But I just, you know, if you run in there with a full group and if you're looking for RPs, you should probably find something else to do. Perhaps increase the RPs in specific areas if you are solo. Yeah. And if and maybe that is a who talked about the zone bonus earlier? This is a great imagine doing this in a zone like a zone that is underpopulated. So if a Zerg is, if there's not, 100 players, if it's just a small number of people, you don't want to, that's the thing, you don't want to encourage the entire BG to run, I mean, they're not going to run solo, but you don't want to encourage the BG to find a way around these incentives by like either running ungrouped, which would be really dumb, but you could do it, or running like smaller groups. But you could increase RPs in specific areas if you solo. That works too. If they are strictly solo zones, then we need to move essences somewhere else for those of us who want to hunt them and not do soloing. That's a good point. I mean, there are essences on EV that spawn that are also, they also spawn around areas that I think were designed for smaller encounters. But you're making the point for yourself. You're proving me wrong. I appreciate that. That's true, Ollie. You're right. They do. Also, there was a great mid fight at mid. I think it was mid Hib. I think Alb got in a little bit on it too. This was like 3 weeks ago. I don't think I recorded it. Maybe I did. I'll have to go back and look. Maybe I did. But there was this great fight on that little, just like the sort of destroyed, half destroyed, mostly destroyed little town on the southeast side of EV, in the main area, where like mids were hiding inside of rooms, and there were like 100 mids in that little town. It was so cool. That's what I would do personally. Set up bonuses. So the environment around Glenlock Fast will provide more RPs for solo players and reduced for groups of more than, and then announce it. Extraterrestrial? Because that sounds great. Have it announced. But it's got to be like the more people that go in and gank, or groups that end up going there to gank, have to be like, there has to be a penalty for folks that do that. You watched it on my stream? Okay, then I'll have to go back and find it, because that was so cool. That was so much fun. I think it was on Mauler too. I'm pretty sure it was on Mauler. I know Dance was on, because Dance was the MA in the group. It was such a great fight. By the way, good time to mention, especially if we're going to wrap things up. One of the things I've been working on, and Todd, I've got to reach back out to Eric, because Eric messaged me, and I didn't get a chance to respond to him. We talked on the phone, by the way. So they're one of my best friends growing up. So, oh my God, I'm still asking you how to pronounce your name here so that I don't. Is it okay? Forget it. I keep forgetting how to pronounce ZZXII. Zizix. Okay. Thank you. So Zizix and I went to high school together, and one of my best friends growing up, who is definitely like, Zizix is way closer to ZZX. Okay, fine. So ZZX is very close to, and has been like lifelong friends with, and I fell out of touch with. He is a brilliant programmer, and I got to spend a couple hours on the phone with him 2 weeks ago, talking about the bot. So I am working on a Discord bot for the game. In fact, there's already a webhook version of it on my Discord. Moobot just posted about it, latest keep and tower status. So you can go into my Discord, and anytime a keep or a tower is taken, it automatically posts to Discord. There's also every 15 minutes a realm update that posts with all of the keep status and who owns it. I found a really efficient way of getting the data out of the game, and I can now do what I want with it. And so my next step is to build a Discord bot, and I've been working on that. And it's not easy, and it's not free, because the time it's taking for me to learn Node.js is intensive. But the folks who support me on Patreon are contributing enormously to this. because those folks are providing the extra little bit of income that allows me to pivot away from other stuff and work on this bot. So patreon.com/ramicmedia, it goes a long way. And if you guys want to see development of stuff like that moving forward, if you want to see custom videos, fight recaps, this PvE series that I'm going to release next week, I'm going to start releasing it next week, which has a tour of these really incredible zones that are like not traveled in the game. The Patreon page is the way to support all of that work, because it actually is a lot of work. So if you feel like it, and you do get something immediately out of it, because you get access to, like, I think there's like 12 or 13 hours worth of fight recap videos on that Patreon now that are available only to Patreon supporters, where we go through the biggest fights of the week. Oh my God, look at that. That is so cool. So Extraterrestrial and ZZX have now run into each other. That is the... Okay, so this is how cool the community is. If you're watching this stream... Now, Borgio. If you're watching the stream and you didn't think of how... you didn't realize how cool this community is, this is a great example. There's such a tight-knit community here that is not closed off to new people joining it, which I think is one of the really cool parts about Dark Age of Camelot, is that there's so many people that are willing to open their arms up to returning players, to new players, and treat them like they've known them for years. And then there are situations like this where folks knew each other from 10 plus years ago, ran with each other, and have now found each other on the stream. That's pretty cool. And I've got a log somewhere of it. I stopped keeping count like a month ago. It's a text file somewhere on my desktop, I think. But I think there's been like 25 or 26 people who have resubbed to the game. I don't know if they've stuck around, but they've resubbed to the game because of the stream, because of watching the gameplay. Or at least those are the ones that have reached out to me and said, hey, I resubbed because of you, which is super cool. Anyway, that's awesome, guys. I'm glad that there's a little reunion here. That's really neat. ZZX says, Ramic, make a HTML node.js that makes it into a map. So that is where Eric's help is going to come in handy. Well, Eric has been enormously helpful, but apparently he has some experience doing this. And so in fact, the plan is to make a Realm War map. So that's the next step. The first step is to build the Discord bot that people can load in, like the official channel, and that people in Discord can load in and get it in their own like guild and alliance Discords. So they get like real-time alerts as to when stuff is taken and get like kind of a status update. There are some things that I am not going to incorporate, features that I'm not going to incorporate because they would be super unfair for me to like for me to publish to the public without being logged into the game. But that's like the next step. Can we pull this clip up on stream? Am I allowed to do that? Should we watch it together? Turn the volume down. Okay.
Yeah, I gotta sit here and love breaking down this door.
Hold on, so let's go back real quick. Can I? Oh, I don't want to go full screen because we'll never... But, do you see he's on a horse beating the door down? Wow, it is from 2008. Very cool. Very, very, very cool. All right, we're going to wrap this up. Look, again, patreon.com/RamicMedia. I would encourage you to go and check that out. I think to get in is $5 a month. There's different tiers, and there are benefits that come with those tiers. And to the current Patreon supporters that we have, like, you guys just, like, you rock. You absolutely rock. The community is ever growing. Borgio is the latest to join today. And I greatly, greatly appreciate Borgio for being a part of that. He joined as a tier 3, which is awesome. Yeah, the list keeps growing. So definitely worth it. And it funds a whole bunch of other stuff. Siambra and Pronder, thank you guys for being Beard Crew members. That's the highest level of support for the channel. It's amazing. Borgio and Beeb, thank you guys for being tier 3. Warms my heart. Thank you guys so much for helping. Bellamar, Gods, Ollie, Veneer, and Keed, thank you guys so much for the support. That is amazing. So, and if you are not in my Discord, join the Discord. It's the very least you can do. You get in, you be a part of the community. You can be one of those people that helps answers questions. Sometimes we get new folks that come in that are completely lost, that need help. And if you're not in a position, which a lot of us in this world are not right now, to support somebody else's work, do the thing that is, like, amazing by going in and helping other people in the game that are starting out. Use your knowledge. Spread the word about the channel so we can get more people to come back to the game. That's a great way of doing this too. Right? Even if you're not in a position to do anything else, spreading the word and getting into Discord, whether it's mine, the official one, and helping people out, it's the way to do it, for sure. I really appreciate you guys tuning in for this State of the Game. It'll be on YouTube later tonight, early tomorrow morning. I'll also post it for Patreon supporters too, so that you guys get a link and you can watch it again. And we'll do the next one next Tuesday, after the duo stream with Bammers. And if you guys have questions, you can always submit them ahead of time. All right, that's it for me tonight. Until next time, be safe, wear a mask. Take care of everybody in this crazy world around you. Please look out for everybody else. They need it. Not on tomorrow. Family Day. Back Thursday, 7:45 p.m. Eastern. And we will do some giveaways. I've got some Mithril packs and a game time card to give away on Thursday night. So 7:30 p.m., 7:45 p.m. Eastern, the stream starts. 8:30, the giveaways begin. Have a great night, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Ciao.